ADHD reWired, episode 466. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD reWired. Today's guest is Jamie Walsh. Jamie is a husband, father of four, and business owner with ADHD. Jamie was diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. Before he was coaching, he worked in higher education for 16 years. He earned his BA from Providence College and what's the MSc?
Master's of Science.
And a Master's of Science degree from Boston College. He completed a certification program for coaching teens and college students with ADHD from JST Coaching and Training. With over 20 years of experience in various school environments, consulting for organizations, as well as his own personal journey, Jamie is passionate about making a difference in the lives of struggling learners and wants to empower clients to believe in themselves. Jamie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So I'm kind of excited about this conversation because I think we're going to explore both your story and do actually some coaching. And it's always fun to coach coaches. All right. So let's start a bit with your story. Tell us when you were diagnosed and kind of what led up to that.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I was diagnosed in the summer of 2017. As far as what led up to that, my wife is a librarian. She is great at research, as you might expect for a reference librarian to be. This had impacted our marriage for some time, and not being diagnosed at the time or really paying attention to symptoms or signs, it was impacting our personal life. It was impacting our day-to-day. And so she had started really planting that seed a little bit. And of course, at the time, I was defensive. No, this is ridiculous. Also chiming in with a lot of things that now irk me when I hear other people say like, oh, well, everybody has ADHD. And so
you were that guy.
Yeah, I was that guy. Yes. But it gets to the point where something that really is vivid in my memory is that I came home from work one night, and after an interaction with my wife, she was in tears. And so it unfortunately took that moment for me to start moving forward in learning more about what this could be, even if I didn't think I had it, or even if I didn't think it was a big deal at the time. It was important to her. And so therefore it should have been important to me. And so probably like many people who start the process of discovering what is ADHD and they look into literature or books, she had checked out Delivered from Distraction by Dr. Hallowell. And I remember reading the first chapter, and one of the first things it said was, if you don't read any other chapter in this book, please read this one. And so that got my attention, as well as the fact that, he laid out, this is a book that you don't have to read chapter to chapter. And I thought, oh, well, I can relate to that. And so, as you may know, it also points to a section of the book that said, if you're curious, answer these questions. If you're curious if you might have ADHD, answer these questions. And so I'm reading through this. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me. This is exactly me. It resonated very well and soundly. And so that was sort of the introduction to learning more about, this thing that is now such a big piece of my life. But I was stubborn. This is, as I mentioned, I was diagnosed in 2017. This is probably 2015 or maybe 16. So I really was stumbling over myself for a while before I started taking it seriously.
So what was going on at the time when you were actually diagnosed? Like, I know you were doing some job hopping, like, tell us about that a little bit.
I changed jobs about every 2 years, looking back at my resume, always looking for the next best thing. I feel like my brain should have a label that says FOMO, like fear of missing out. Like I feel like that is like, oh, there's the next best thing. And a lot of it was in with good intentions of wanting to, be a good husband, be a good father, provide for my family. But when we made a move, which was our fourth or fifth at the time, from one state to another, I decided that I would get tested. I would do a neuropsych evaluation. Going through the process, it's rigorous. For anyone that has gone through it, it's not just, you answer 10 to 15 questions on a sheet of paper. It's a rigorous process that takes several hours. And I remember feeling somewhat shame, feeling frustration, like there's something wrong with you, but also a sense of relief even before getting the results that I was at least going through this process and would have answers. And then, when the diagnosis came, it was, again, a sense of relief, a sense of, okay, this makes sense, looking back on a lot of the decisions that I had made or things that had happened in our life. But it wasn't until the evaluation portion of going through my diagnosis with the psychiatrist that really sort of changed and tweaked things.
How so?
Well, I had a terrible experience with it. Going through my evaluation, I couldn't even not that I would, but I wouldn't even remember the name of this particular person that went over my evaluation with me. But to say that their bedside manner was not good is an understatement. This particular doctor said things to both me and my wife, like, I'm surprised that Jamie's not drug addicted and on the street. I'm surprised you've made it as far as you have, having earned your bachelor's and master's, with ADHD. They actually took my wife. They asked if I could step outside and speak to my wife privately, and said things like, you got your work cut out for you. Recommended to watch the movie Regarding Henry with Harrison Ford, which is about, I believe, it's been a long time since I've seen it. I believe he gets dementia. So it's just sort of like relating that piece of the brain with ADHD and my symptoms. So one of my strongest areas of growth, as I've come to now call them, Eric, is my processing skills. I have very slow processing skills, which is frustrating, right? And so it was just a very disappointing and frustrating experience to go through. And it's left a huge mark on my wife in particular. Like this is our first experience, going through this process with someone in the medical field. Like this is what I have to look forward to. So, I've become very passionate about reminding clients, but also anyone, that it has nothing to do with your intelligence at all. And that's really important, because that embarrassment, that shame can quickly lead into that snowball or domino effect where imposter syndrome creeps in and you start thinking, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I different than my peers, etc. So yeah, I'll pause there.
Let me ask, so how much of, I hear stories like this a lot where the way information is delivered from professionals is, it's like, really, like, it's almost hard to believe, right? But it's, but these are things you can't really make up, right? How much of how you responded to how this information was delivered to you was kind of informed also by some of your family's history with mental illness and addiction, and sort of the history of that for you? Like, so can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Given the fact that I'm a slow processor, I probably didn't connect that in the moment, but it's definitely something that has been discussed a lot. Even now, I have a tremendous relationship with my therapist, and, really digging into my past of my mother being, recovering alcoholic, and my sister as well. And just like having the childhood of going through what I went through. So I think that definitely could have played into, how the information was delivered when receiving my diagnosis. But nonetheless was frustrating. Is that?
Yeah, so I wanted to just give the context for listeners. So talk a little bit about your mom and your sister, if you would.
Of course. My mom passed away in 2011 from an accidental suicide. So what does that mean, right? Even now, saying it out loud, This is something that I've struggled a lot with in terms of delivering the information to other people, and just sort of being okay with how she died. She was a recovering alcoholic, but was in recovery for over 22 years. My sister, at the time, a chronic alcoholic. This is in 2011. My mom came home one day to find my sister passed out on the floor, completely unconscious, unresponsive, for what was probably the 20th time. And in a temporary moment of insanity, my mom just checked out, and I think just couldn't deal with the pain of seeing her daughter like this, and decided to take a very large amount of acetaminophen and swallow it. Now, I didn't know, maybe many people don't know, that acetaminophen is very dangerous if you take it in large quantities. Going back to the accidental piece, I don't think my mom necessarily wanted to, check out of this world. Maybe in that moment of just absolute despair, she wasn't thinking clearly. She didn't pass away right away. She actually suffered for about 5 days in the hospital. I'm thankful that I got to see her lucid before she regressed quickly and have a conversation with her about what had happened. And she communicated to me that, she wasn't trying to do that. So it's painful to talk about, only because I don't know sometimes what is truth with that scenario. And it's something that's painful when you think about your mom in that light. But she passed away about 5 days later. Her liver, unfortunately, started to fail. And, this is all during a time where my wife and I were relatively newly married, and we had a newborn baby, and my sister was still in the throes of her chronic alcoholism. And so somehow my sister, probably about 6 months to a year after my mom passed away, after being in several rehab facilities, stopped. Sometimes I think, I don't know how or why, and to your point, Eric, some people I know struggle with this is a choice. This is a decision that people can make. And it's not, alcoholism is not a disease. People have this choice, and, personal people in my family that struggle with that. But my sister did stop and was in recovery for 9 years. And sadly, she passed away in December of 2020 of fentanyl overdose. This is a little bit even trickier than my mom, because I don't know whether or not it was intentional. She was, again, in recovery for a long time, but, information has come out that I'll keep to myself. But in some ways, I think it is kind of a miracle that I'm not, in that boat myself. I have a lot of, I have a deep faith in something that I take very seriously. And of course, my wife and kids and family have been, tremendous in that. But these two very real, very sad things that have happened in my life have really had an impact on my ADHD and how and why I've done certain things, particularly with addiction with ADHD brains, and how it is a very real thing. We were talking off the air, of course, how, I have an addictive personality with certain things, and how it's difficult for me to deny myself certain pleasures, whether it be sugar or some type of selfish behavior, right? And so I guess I would say to anyone who's listening that addiction in and of itself is very sad and something to be taken very seriously. But also, if you think that you have an ADHD brain, start looking into information about how this could seriously impact you.
Jamie, thank you so much for sharing that part of your story. When we come back from the break, I want to explore kind of how you've sort of taken these life experiences and moved forward with that. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from the members of our award-winning coaching community at coachingrewired.com, where you can learn more about our coaching and accountability groups that meet 3 times a week for 10 weeks, and our alumni membership community, where past members can receive and give ongoing support for maintenance and continued growth. How would you like to get $500 off for our spring coaching sessions? We're offering a $500 early registration discount incentive this week when members join sections led by ADHD reWired coaches Kat Hoyer or Kristen Martz. This registration kickoff event for our spring season is this week on Thursday, February 2nd at
12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern.
Go to coachingrewired.com to get your name on our spring interest list so you can get started with your pre-registration process, which includes watching a 30-minute webinar all about our coaching groups and answering some questions. To start the process, go to coachingrewired.com and add your name to our interest list. Then check your email, including your spam folder, to confirm that you want to be on the list. Then we'll send you an email with everything you'll need to join us. Are you wondering if it's possible to live intentionally and work smarter with ADHD? It is. What if you could learn beside other adults with ADHD, developing the skills and strategies that can help reduce the whirlwind and have more control of your life? What if you had a space that's shame-free and judgment-free, where you're not just learning about the tools, but where you can practice using those tools and strengthening your habits to live a more wholehearted life?
I had decided to join the group because even though I had made a lot of progress with individual therapy and my own self-work, I just felt like my growth was plateauing. And I really just wanted to try something like drastically different from everything that I had tried before.
I'm so happy to be around these people that think like I do. It's just such a relief to know that you're not alone, that you might not think like everybody around you, but you certainly think like a bunch of people that are in the world.
This group is like an iceberg. The surface level benefits are obvious: increasing productivity, managing time blindness, learning how to plan effectively based on your values and personal goals. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. What lies underneath is so much more amazing and massive and powerful.
When I think of success, I now focus on what is kind, compassionate, and possible. I try not to think about what I should or should have done or what people expect of me, and instead try to think of what I really want and what I think I'm capable of.
It's so nice to be part of a group of people who get it, who we don't have to apologize for our being. You guys get it.
If you are thinking about joining this group, I'd highly encourage it. There was something amazingly special about growing with a group of people who all had similar struggles as I did. It was encouraging, it was safe, it was inspiring, and above all, it was healing.
Your support can start with a group of people where you will be seen, understood, and accepted. So if you're sick of trying harder and want to try something different, and you could fully commit to 5 to 7 hours a week for our 10-week intensive coaching program, then go now to coachingrewired.com to see the sections and times you could choose from and to start your pre-registration process. And don't miss your chance to get $500 off enrollment for select sections of our spring coaching season with ADHD reWired coaches Kat Hoyer or Kristen Martz. Join us this week on Thursday, February 2nd at
12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern.
The deadline to submit all pre-registration submissions is at 11:59 p.m. the day before our registration events. So go to coachingrewired.com to get started. And if you're hearing this after that date, the website is still the same. Go to coachingrewired.com. Growth happens here. That's coachingrewired.com. All right, we are back with Jamie Walsh. All right, so before the break, you were sharing with us kind of your story of some of your family's history of some mental health challenges and some real loss that you had in your family as a result of that. Now, one of the things that we talked about when we were first exploring you coming on the podcast is just this idea that kind of anything is possible and that we can always reinvent our life kind of at any time, and really looking at sort of resilience as a superpower in a sense, right? It's funny. I asked in my coaching groups on day one, I asked members what what one of their biggest strengths or superpowers is, and one of the things that I always share is I'm a lemonade maker, right? Like I take lemons and turn them into lemonade. And it sounds like you are kind of doing the same thing. So why don't you talk about what kind of lemonade have you made?
Yeah, I love that. There's definitely been a lot happen in since my mom and since my marriage. I got married in 2009, And we talked about this idea of resiliency. And so it's probably the best word that comes to mind, although I definitely might sweeten it up, pun intended, with the lemonade maker. As I mentioned previously, my mom and my sister have really made me think about my own, now that I'm aware of my own ADHD diagnosis and my behaviors and own addictive personalities. I think I've always been somebody who's resilient because I've been in those moments where the imposter syndrome can creep in, and anxiety and depression, which are, of course, as we know, some of the most common comorbidities, can overtake you, and it's a horrible feeling. And so for me, I go back to certain times where those, washed over me, and never want to feel that way again. And I want to write my own story. I think we all love an underdog story in certain ways, and it's not meant to be kitschy or cliche, but life is hard. I have a meme that my sister sent me a few years back, and it's sort of in my rainy day folder of things to make me smile or make me laugh. The meme is, being an adult is like trying to fold a fitted sheet. And I remember looking at that for the first time and laughing out loud. And she had such a great sense of humor like that. And I feel that way too. I think, life is hard. It's about how you respond to things. And so I know
if that is the case, I just have to say then I have not yet learned how to adult.
No, I don't think many of us have.
Because folding a fitted sheet, oh my gosh, like that is some kind of like wizardry. Like it's an attempt at a fold, and then it's mostly just like scrunching it in a ball and shoving it in the back of the closet.
Yeah, it makes me smile just thinking about it. And so I think for me, why resilience comes up is because with my ADHD brain, like many people, I have a tendency to start and stop, whether it's task initiation or not seeing a task or a project through has always been a struggle. And I think that if I take that mentality of, all right, well, forget it, going into the fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset, then I'd be screwed. So I think it took a while, but getting to I'm okay with the fact that this is going to happen again. I will probably start something and not finish it, or have difficulty starting a thing. But now educating myself, I think as an adult, and particularly in starting this business, I've become a learner in the sense that I crave to want to know more and more and more about myself, about ADHD, about just human behavior and what works for me, setting myself up for success and hopefully setting my clients up for success. So that is sort of how I look at this sort of recreating my identity, particularly since 2018.
So you're an ADHD coach, and you're sort of in the first year or two of your business?
Yes. I just completed my second year. It's been a journey. I wish I had done it 10 years ago, but I know that also I wouldn't have the wisdom and knowledge that I do now and life experiences. But yes, I coach mostly college students and adults, but I have coached some teens as well. I just really, really enjoy it for many reasons. I think when I first started coaching, my niche was teens and college students, and particularly college students because of my experience in higher education. But the more I coach adults, the more I really enjoy it because I have so much in common with so many of my clients, whether it's someone who's married and, their marriage is being impacted by their severe ADHD, or someone who may be going through or has similar problems professionally because their ADHD is impacting their performance. I can resonate, and I'm super, grateful having the experience and training that I was able to get. But I feel like a lot of my coaching is really life experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really, I often hear that people don't really want to work with ADHD professionals who don't have ADHD. I totally get that. And I think that, and maybe as a general sort of idea, like that makes a lot of sense. I also think that I am sure that there are also really skilled, empathetic ADHD coaches and therapists and professionals who also don't have ADHD. But I do think it feels like, from my experience, and I think from a lot of people that I've talked to about this, it does feel different for most people with ADHD working with someone who doesn't have ADHD. I know that there are exceptions to that rule, so I'm not saying like you don't work with a non-ADHD coach for. So let's talk a little bit about, we were talking about sort of coaching the coach here. One of the things that I love is when we can really get into a conversation that we're kind of
pulling back the curtain a little bit.
Mhm.
And I always tell like my coaching clients in my groups, I'm like, let me just make one thing really clear right off the bat. I do not have all my shit together, right? Like, so like whatever pedestal you are like putting me on, like please don't, right? Because it is, it's like, yeah, I do a sort of a narrow sect of stuff pretty well, and I know what I'm good at. And there's also a whole ton of stuff in my life. I'm like, oh boy, I need more help. So let's talk about that, because I think it's like, oh, when
Yes.
we can normalize that, like we all have struggles, like then our struggles actually become kind of normal, and we can kind of just work on it instead of dealing with all the shame around it.
It's so funny that you said that. Thank you for sharing that, by the way, and your humility. You would ask me again off the air, like, what do you think your biggest challenge is? And I'm like, the fact that I can't even like answer that, that's a challenge. Like, I think my brain is my biggest challenge, and that's okay. I have 4 kids, and we are 2 full-time now working adults, and that wasn't the case, prior to my starting coaching. And so it's a new chapter of our lives, but probably my biggest challenge is my ADHD, and that's okay. It's also probably the biggest opportunity, now that and I say we, I mean, I'm the coach. Something that I am exploring is having my wife become part of the business. She's neurotypical, is not diagnosed. It's funny, all of the personal issues that were impacted, like saying that terribly, typical ADHD brain, our marriage was impacted by my ADHD is what I'm trying to say. Despite that, my wife and I are a great team. That's not always the case. And we kind of laugh about it. We're like, oh, when we're not trying to kill each other, like we're a really great team. So that's something that we're exploring as to how, she could be involved in the business. But I don't have my shit together. My wife doesn't always have her shit together. But I think what's important, particularly for whether it's a single person or a couple, is that, utilize each other's strengths. My wife and we have similarities for sure, but we're very different. She's very detail oriented. I'm not. I am very extroverted. She's not. So, when you have the yin and the yang, you can really create good harmony. And I think that's an exciting thing.
So you had said that your biggest challenge being your ADHD brain. Okay, so that's a lot of things, right? So
Yes.
let's explore maybe a functional impairment, because we know that everyone's flavor of ADHD is just a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So functionally, what would you say are a couple real challenges that your ADHD brain presents for you? Now I know you mentioned processing speed.
Yeah. Yes.
And how does that show up for you? So let's explore that for a moment.
For me, it could be whether I'm literally in a conversation with my wife, with someone else, I'm not absorbing the information as quickly as someone else's. So if you take that and apply it into a work situation or school, I have to work harder. I was explaining this to a client recently that one thing that sort of helped my brain is that I have to do basically like pre-work in order to do the work. So an example is like if I get an assignment and the teacher or the coach says, okay, this is what is expected of you, I have to then go back and reread it and then create notes as to the plan that I'm going to make. At first, it's annoying, like realizing like that this is sort of like the extra work that I have to do. It's been a game changer. It's like, okay, so I have to do extra work, but now like I understand, like for so much of my life, it was like, well, I'm just not going to do it. Right. Like
it sounds like you're doing that to create scaffolding for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And it's like, you can either like say, well, crap, like it's so much work to create the scaffolding. It's like, or I know what I need to build, which is the scaffolding in order to do the things I want to do.
That's a great metaphor. Yes, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. And it shows up in other ways. Sometimes I will be in a generic conversation with my wife and I'll say something maybe that I didn't mean in the context of the conversation. And she'll be like, what the hell did you just say? Like, you didn't use that in the right way. And I'll get all frustrated, and that's fine. I think that happens to the best of us. But the pre-work is what has been, a challenge, but a blessing in the same way. It's just like, okay, like this is what it's going to take. I would say the next 2 functionality areas that are issues for me, and probably 1 in 1A or 2 in 2A would be impulsivity and emotional regulation. They can go hand in hand, but this idea of like not being able to regulate your emotions when something good is happening, or conversely, when you receive constructive feedback, it's like, oh, well, I'm the worst person in the world and I'm going to get fired or the sky is falling. That's a struggle for me. I definitely have what is known as, RSD, that rejection sensitivity dysphoria.
Is that something you want to explore?
Sure. It's, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, is really this phenomenon that's, those people like myself who get feedback, constructive feedback, and maybe even critical feedback, take it very personally and not always as a learning moment, more so as, well, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, that I'm a bad person and that creeps into the shame and what's wrong with me. It's just holding a heavier weight, I guess, than what really should be. I think of the children's book, Henny Penny, like the sky is falling, which is ironic because I see this to my wife all the time, that even though I struggle with this, with RSD, I'm also, for the most part, practical when it doesn't relate to me. And so,
it's always easier to, work on other people's challenges than it is our own.
Yeah, exactly. So when it's not like related to me, it's like, oh, well, you're fine. Like, or things are going to work out. But when it involves, yourself, it's a whole different ballgame. So I think part of what has helped me through, the RSD is, coming up with different coping strategies. For me, exercise, prayer, therapy, talking things out, recognizing like, okay, what helps me get out of this funk?
Of those things you just mentioned, I said exercise, prayer, and what was the other one?
Therapy.
Which one would you say has been the most beneficial that could have a greater impact if you were to do more of it?
Exercise.
Okay. Tell me about your exercise.
So I've always been somebody that likes to be active in some way. I'm not necessarily, my brain is running on a motor at all times, but I do have what my wife and I like to joke as itchy butt syndrome. IBS, just a different IBS.
Nice.
And, feel the need. Again, it's that like fear of missing out or like, what's the next best thing? And that can be challenging. But a strategy for me has been exercise. And it could be when I'm feeling fidgety or restless. It can also be when I'm feeling anxious. And I think, going back to greatest challenge of an ADHD brain, I've been challenged with when's the right time to exercise? Is it in the morning? Is it like during the day? Is it at night? And how that impacts, not only myself in terms of my schedule, but then others. And that's where the impulsivity comes in. It's like, oh, well, say to my wife, hey, I'm going to go work out right now without like thinking it through. And she's like, are you serious? Like we have this, and this to take care of. Like you can't go work out right now. But it is a great coping mechanism to release that stress, to know that like, hey, okay, I can lean on this when these symptoms are getting in the way. And I'm actually excited, I guess, for lack of a better word, that I've been getting back into a passion of mine, which is tennis. I was a tennis player growing up, and I really haven't played consistently since probably right after college. And so it's been a blast. I don't even think of it as exercise because I enjoy it so much, but that is definitely something that I wish I could do more of. But it's also a challenge too, because it's like fitting it into your schedule and then you're making those excuses and, that emotional regulation creeps in.
We do have to fit one more quick break into our schedule here. But when we come back, we will pick this up right where we left off. So we will be right back.
Paying bills, writing reports, doing the dishes, scheduling appointments, updating resumes, studying, organizing the closet, emptying the litter box. What do all these things have in common? Well, they're not always fun, but they are things that our members of our adult study hall community have completed and more. We all have things on our to-do list we'd rather not be doing, but at adultstudyhall.com, you won't have to do them alone. It's free for the first week and only $19.99 a month after that. Membership gives you access to our 24/7 drop-in room or ASH 24/7 for on-demand body doubling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You'll also be able to access our Adult Study Hall Plus or ASH Plus sessions, which are our themed and guided sessions that happen every week for things like decluttering, creative work, writing, anything career related, and more. There are plenty of ways to get real-time accountability in our Ash Plus sessions, our 24/7 drop-in room, and our amazing body doubling community. If you're looking for real-time accountability, your virtual co-working body doubling community awaits. Go to adultstudyhall.com, and it's free for the first week, and it definitely works best if you actually try it. So go to adultstudyhall.com and come work with us. That's adultstudyhall.com. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our patrons at adhdrewired.com/Patreon. A huge thank you to all of our patrons who help us stay independent as a social good business. And thank you to Rosie B, Bianca V, and Patrick R for becoming our newest patrons. This podcast is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. So if the work that we are doing has had a positive impact on your ADHD journey, and if you're in a financial position where you can give $5, $10, $25 a month or more, consider becoming a patron by going to adhdrewired.com/Patreon. Support us at any amount that makes sense to you, and you can get ad-free episodes starting at just $5 a month. Want more than just ad-free episodes? Then consider becoming a patron at the $25 a month level for a taste of group coaching. Patrons at the $25 a month level can join me every fourth Tuesday of the month at 3 p.m. Central. That's every fourth Tuesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. But if that's not quite in the budget for you, or you can't attend that, but you don't want to miss the tips and strategies and discussions that we have each month on the patron-only coaching call, then members at $10 a month can get the audio recordings of our monthly coaching calls right in your podcast app. Just go to the Patreon page for ADHD Rewired, and you'll set it up there. Thank you again for all of our listeners and all our patrons who help keep this podcast independent and giving us the gift of having a positive impact on our fellow ADHD brains all around the world. So if your budget allows and you're able to support our mission with a monthly contribution to the bottom of my heart, thank you. Remember, perks start at just $5 a month with ad-free episodes, and support can start at any amount that makes sense to you. That's adhdrewired.com/Patreon. And thank you. All right, we are back with Jamie Walsh. All right, so right before the break, you said you started playing tennis again, which took me every ounce of my own willpower to not jump into my whole soapbox about how amazing pickleball is, and wondering if you've tried pickleball yet.
So I have not actually, and I'm laughing because the club that we're fortunate enough to belong to in our town and where I play tennis, they have some beautiful indoor tennis courts. Pickleball is absolutely bananas.
It's taken over.
I hadn't heard of it until about a year ago. My dad was the one who introduced me to the concept, which probably makes sense because a lot of people 60 and older are playing. But now it's really just blown up to everyone. I haven't played. I'm now, of course, tooting my own horn, thinking well, if I play pickleball, it's going to interrupt my tennis game. But I really do want to get out there and try it.
Okay, so you had said before that we took the break that, whether you're feeling anxious or you got the itchy butt syndrome going on, that has been sort of your cue to go exercise. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. So what would it look like for you to not let that be the cue, or for you to create a routine around that, around exercise?
Yeah. I think it would look great. And it's something that I've done and continue to do. And that's the struggle, right? Again, going back to, my biggest challenge of my own ADHD is nothing's perfect. And so, I'll create a schedule and say okay, this week I'm going to work out at lunch and this is what I'm going to do. And then it doesn't feel right. Or, of course, sometimes life happens.
So you say you're going to work out at lunch but it doesn't feel right. So tell me about that.
I guess what I mean is that I'll go work out and either I'm not into the workout or I feel rushed. I feel like I didn't plan it as well as I could have. So it's this, I think probably goes back to that processing, right? Did I really think this through enough to schedule working out or playing tennis, whatever I'm doing during this time if I'm feeling rushed?
So you planned to play tennis or you planned to work out at lunchtime. Then you're actually doing what you intended on doing. And at the same time, your brain is telling you, wait a minute, Jamie, did you plan this the right way? I mean, is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, but when you say it that way,
Well, and it's funny because I want to share with you. A couple of years ago, I was sort of doing some experimentation with my own schedule, and one of the things I wanted to do because I tend to work a lot of hours, and so to try to counter that, I made my summer schedule where I kind of started late, and so it was very intentional. Like I want to go and say play frisbee golf like during the day, like or before I start my day. So like I'm out playing frisbee golf. It's like 11 in the morning, and I'm actually feeling guilty playing frisbee golf because I feel I should be working. And I found that so
Mhm.
interesting because this was actually part of my yearly goals. Like, so I'm
Yeah.
actually doing the thing I intended on doing. And so in that moment, I was really able to sort of like stop and take a step back and be like, this is so interesting, right? This is absolutely what I've intended on doing. I've made my schedule to allow me to do this. And yet there's still that voice in the back of my head that goes, what are you doing? You're supposed to be working. Right. And so when we can sort of like take a step back and say, wait, this was my intention. I'm doing what I intended. And yet there's these sort of echoes of sort of old scripts. So I'm wondering for you, are these like some echoes of old scripts for you that when you were actually doing the thing you've intended on doing, but it's different from what you are used to doing? Does your brain kind of go, what are you doing?
Absolutely. I love the way that you explained it, like the feeling guilty, whether it's I should be working, which is I would say most of the time, oh, I should be working and not like enjoying myself. And that goes into the when, which I find interesting in your example of like, at the beginning, early in the day. Well, this is a great time because you haven't even started your workday, right? Whereas for me, maybe the lunch hour time, I'm sure that was a piece of how I was feeling, guilty. Oh, I should be working and not, enjoying myself.
How much do you struggle with transitions?
A little.
A little bit.
But I think that's part of how, ADHDers, not all, but can thrive in chaos.
Okay. Because the reason I was asking that is because like there's been so many times where like I look at my schedule and I'm like, based on my schedule, it looks like it would be, it'd be ideal for me to work out, say between like noon and 2, for example.
Mhm.
But once I'm at my office, the gravitational pull of my office chair is more heavy than any other place I know. So I just have a hard time transitioning. So for me, I know if like once I start, I'm a workhorse, right?
Mhm.
So once I'm in the groove, like I don't want to take that break. It's hard for me to take that break, even though when I've been able to do it, it's actually quite helpful for me. But I also know the amount of sort of energy and effort that's required for me to stop what I'm doing at work, transition to do everything I need to do for the workout, and then come on back to work. I have found that more times than not, like that doesn't actually pan out, right? So I'm wondering if it's a different struggle for you, or if it's similar, and if so, when might be a maybe a more ADHD friendly time for you to work out.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were explaining that, Eric, like you must struggle with the Pomodoro technique.
Yes, and I do a modified version of that. Could be in our adult study hall community. I lead a Pomodoro dance party once a month, and after the first couple of times of doing it, I'm like, you know what? Let's do the Pomodoro style, but I want to do 50-minute work blocks and then 10-minute dance breaks. And I find it to be that for me that works so much better because
Mhm.
it gives me time to get into each thing that I'm actually doing.
Yeah. I think with transitions, there's a little bit of struggle. For me, I am somebody that does better with structure. But, as I've come to learn in my own journey, like you think of the concept of time management, it's not just people that are, always late for an appointment or missing appointments. It's how you manage your time. I haven't always been great at that. You book too many things, you try to get too many meetings into the day. And so that's, I think, something that I still work on a daily basis. Is like, how do you balance, that work-life balance? But also, I think transitions can be difficult for me for silly reasons when I hyper focus on the dumbest things. When I know,
I'm hearing some self judgment here, Jamie.
when I
Silly
know
reasons
my
and
kids from
like,
school and I'm just like focusing on something really mundane and really not important. And I'm looking at my timer, knowing like, I need to leave right now. Why am I not leaving right now?
because it's hard for our brain to shift.
Yes.
Right. So it doesn't even matter. Like whatever you were doing is giving you a good supply of dopamine.
Yes.
And even though you might be like intellectually knowing that like this is not important right now, but there's also the other part of your brain goes, but this feels good. Keep going.
I think there's a
Right.
level of arrogance too. I really do. Like, oh, like I'll figure it out, or like I'll make up, like maybe not make up the time by like, oh, like I'm gonna go speeding. Of course not, but like there's a level of, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'll make sure that I get there.
Is it arrogance, or do you think that like there's a history of things have kind of worked out, and why would this be any different?
You would think that would be better answer than what I would say.
I so appreciate your honesty right now. Okay, so when you do work out, like how do you feel? Because I know for me, like my brain it literally organizes itself when I'm working out. How is it for you?
It's amazing. I mean, it's one of those things where it's funny, right? We know that this thing is going to make us feel better. So why don't we do it when we're supposed to do it?
Talk about how it makes you feel better.
For me, it's like just, for listeners, I am on medication, and for me, I've had a very overall good experience. Like it really, when I was resistant to take, and this will be relevant to my answer, it was kind of like, where has this been my whole life? When I found the right dose of medication, like it really gave me that focus. When I exercise, particularly like if I'm, playing tennis, it's almost like this cleanse of the same focus, but without the medicine. It's such a great feeling. And of course, the added benefits of the exercise itself.
Have you taken note about how, like, say, for the 3 to 4 hours after you have a good workout, like how you feeling?
Yeah, you feel great. And
Less anxiety,
way less anxiety.
less itchy butt.
Yep.
Okay. And in terms of the emotional self-regulation, would you say that the sort of the flare-ups happen less when you're working out on a regular basis?
Absolutely. Your mind is clear, much clearer.
So the thing that is kind of getting in your way of kind of doing the things you really wanted to be doing, the you said it's kind of that emotional self-regulation, the itchy butt, and you're letting emotional dysregulation be a cue for your exercise right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, one of the things that I have learned and have relearned a number of times over the last decade, once I actually realized how important exercise is for my brain, because I've slipped here and there, and it's like every time I slip, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't not exercise. Like I have to be exercising. Especially over like during COVID, and then when I got my motorcycle, and like that was my hyper focus for like a good 2 months, and I stopped exercising for 2 months, and then I was like, oh my god, I am seriously depressed right now, because I wasn't exercising. Because the time I would be exercising, I was on a motorcycle, and it was like once again I realized, oh my, I need to exercise for my brain. My mental health depends on me exercising, and so it's every time I'm having that like, I don't really wanna. I remind myself of the why, and it's I'm doing it for my mental health. My mental health needs me to exercise. So this idea of we can't look for the time for exercising, right? We have to make the time, we have to carve out the time, and we have to protect the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there is no right or wrong time to do it. It's what works for you. So what have you found to be the most overall reliable time for you for working out?
It's a great question. I'm going to give you two answers. Typical ADHD form. I feel the best, like in terms of productivity, about like my day when I work out in the morning, because it sets your day up for success. I feel like to your point of like those 3 to 4 hours after you work out, your mind is clear, and it's just a great way to kickstart your day. However, I'm somebody that doesn't always have the best workouts when I work out early in the morning. And, that could just be too bad, so sad. You just need to do it. So that was my first answer. My second answer is my preferred time is the lunch hour, because I do feel like I'm fully engaged in what I'm doing, so long as I can limit that guilt that we talked about earlier of, I should be working. But
well, what if you, instead of trying to limit the guilt, if you notice it in a more mindful way?
Yes.
And knowing that like the idea of neuroplasticity and rewiring our brain means, okay, we're still going to have these thoughts, but we can change how we react to those thoughts. And then over time, because here's what happens when we have these kinds of automatic thoughts, and then it causes us to change our behavior, we are just reinforcing those negative, unhelpful automatic thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we can say, okay, I'm acknowledging I'm having this thought, I'm acknowledging how it's making me feel. I'm also acknowledging that doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong, and this is just sort of the programming of my brain, and I'm gonna just acknowledge it and not stop what I'm doing in the effort to kind of start that reprogramming.
Yeah. And I think that is well taken, that point. And like I said before about being a constant learner, every time I exercise, I try to take something that I might tell a client in terms of time management, what you're going to get from that exercise, but also to the point before about guilt. More and more, I take these little nuggets, these little anecdotes of like, okay, these are the benefits. This is how I'm going to feel. Like I'm more mindful of before even going into the workout, like, this is okay. Give yourself that permission. And that's really important. It's a really important reminder for me, for anyone that sort of struggles with that guilt or doubt.
And what kind of workouts are you doing in the morning that are boring?
Typically in the morning, I will just do cardio, treadmill, elliptical, Stairmaster, typical cardio stuff.
And what are you doing while doing that?
Listening to music.
Okay. Is that enough of a incentive?
It is. I mean, I would say I'm pretty good about being engaged in the workout when I'm there. Okay. It's just not preferred, early in the morning.
It's funny because with like, I have an elliptical at home that, I do it. I don't love it. What I've noticed that if I am having the I don't wannas and I'm like, oh, this is so boring. If I can get engaged in like a show on Netflix or something, like I will literally lose track of time, which is perfect for me when I'm working out. It's actually exactly what I want to do when I'm working out and having a workout. Because I'll say like, all right, when I stop working out, I have to stop the show. I can't keep watching it. Right. And so I can continue where I left off next time I go work out. And so it's great when I have like a show that's like 30 minutes. I try to get at least a 30-minute workout in. But even when I'm running short on time, just to really reinforce that the behavioral habit of working out, I've done workouts that are 10 minutes. It wasn't a great workout, but I did something. I did something. And that I find to be so helpful with keeping that momentum going, especially if you've been kind of struggling to really have that really strong habit. Because I just think it's so important that we have something that is engaging and we can make things more engaging to sort of counteract the Adawanas when we're not feeling that. Because we intellectually, we know the benefits of exercise. Right?
For sure. And I would even encourage, listeners to create, I have like different or compartmentalizing how like if I know I only have 15 minutes, 10-minute workouts, 15-minute workouts, so that you have your go-tos of lists to have that structure. So because how many times maybe I'm alone, but I've gone to the gym and I'm like, all right, well, what do I want to do? Like, I don't know. And then before you know it, you've wasted 20 minutes just trying to figure it out.
So the other thing, if you are open to trying pickleball, a lot of places have open play like in the mornings. That might be something like finding something fun is obviously the most, I think, ideal way to get exercise, especially when you have ADHD, if you are having some resistance to the exercise, right? You said for you tennis, like doesn't feel like exercise, right? Other people you can play tennis with in the morning?
Oh, for sure. And I've really jumped in. I've played more tennis the past 6 months than I have since I was in high school. It's been great.
That's great.
The challenge actually now, which is ironic, given what we're talking about, is other people's schedules. Most people don't have the flexibility that I have to play during the day, but you find a way to make it work.
So is it that you haven't found the people who have the similar schedule as you? Is that the issue?
Yes. Well, so it's that, but it's there's basically a ladder, probably similar to pickleball, a ladder of people who play. And, for the most part, people will send out an email blast. Hey, can anyone play today at this time? And so, of course, my coaching brain, I want to be like, hey, how about we come up with a schedule of when people's availability is?
Well, I'll tell you what. So I don't know where you live, but depending on where you are in the country, there are different ways that open play pickleball gets organized. And I seriously think this is one of the most ADHD friendly kind of like activities because of how many places sort of organize it, where it's literally like open play is from like this hour to this hour, just show up.
Yeah.
Right. And that's which to me is amazing. So there's no other coordination. There's other places where they use apps that will have like rank you by skill level. But I would just say like to start by exploring, see, is that an option? And is there stuff like that for tennis? I don't know if there is. I know that's more of a pickleball culture kind of thing.
No, it's funny. It's pickleball, man. It's so funny. It's the rage. There is. So I'm a 4-row for tennis, and the ladder that I'm on is for 4 rows and above, right? So it's great because you have people that are at your skill level or better, and I think it's fun for everyone who wants to play with others that are more or less at their skill level. The challenge is just the schedule piece. So to your point of like the open play, they have that as well. And they do a good job of like compartmentalizing, but it's for X level. So it's just finding people. And I'm making way more of a big deal of it. It's not that hard.
I always think that if there is something that can be overcomplicated, we'll overcomplicate it.
Yes. Yes.
Right? All right. So let's think for a moment that if you could have a really well established workout routine, and this is lowering some of the emotional dysregulation
Mhm.
and it's increasing your focus, what might be different for you? What other challenges might you feel your brain is better able to actually take on?
I would start with like any type of anxiety, and it could be like your day to day things that stress you out. One thing I don't like about the medication that I'm on is that it gives you a sense of irritability, and when I don't have that, when I have an awesome workout and feel so refreshed and relieved, and so
working out helps make your the side effects of your medication.
yeah. So that would be one thing, and again, it makes sure your brain clear in the sense that, when I take my medication, it's extremely helpful. I feel, very focused, but there's the feeling of what it is like to be on medication. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also, in my opinion, a great and different feeling when you have that dopamine release from exercise and that sense of clarity.
Is there a black and white thinking going on right now? Like it's either exercise or medication. Can it be exercise and medication?
Oh, for sure.
And are you taking your meds regularly?
I am.
Okay. And have you tried other med? Because I often say that if regular irritability is something you're experiencing from the medication, especially when you're coming off the medication, that's a side effect that we should probably explore with your doctor. Because to me, that we don't want to tolerate that kind of side effect.
Yeah, for sure. I think no, it's a good question. In terms of the black and white, I don't. I think it could be. I mean, ultimately, would I like to one day not have to use stimulant medication? Yeah, but I also think I'm okay with the fact of that it's been extremely helpful. Having said it, like anything else, there's responsibility, there's accountability, there's follow up in terms of, okay, how long have I been on this? Is it working the way that I want it to be working? Do I need to make a change? And I'm probably coming to that point where I need to explore a change. I have, regular conversations with my wife about this. So I value her opinion in terms of, do you think this is, like, do I seem different? Do I seem more irritable? Not that that's the only opinion that matters, but it's an important one.
But it's good to ask the people that are close to us in our lives for
Yes.
how they're seeing us. I think that's important.
Yes.
So if on this idea of sort of reinventing life and that anything is possible, what would you like to, if you could have a crystal ball and say, all right, like I figured out this exercise routine. My brain is actually feeling pretty good. I am like managing some of these symptoms around my ADHD. The coaching business is going well. What is it that you are doing that is actually helping the coaching business go well?
That's a great question. I think probably what comes to mind first is this idea of being accountable. It took me a really long time to sort of look in the mirror and say, I'm not pulling my weight, or I'm not really getting my shit done the way that I need to. And I think part of that goes back to that RSD of, when you're getting that constructive feedback, or even if it's just criticism because of these ADHD symptoms that are getting in the way, taking it personally as opposed to what's the larger message there. And so being able to hold myself accountable on a day in and day out basis has been really game changing. And knowing that there's a reset button. So you're going to have days and weeks where you don't have your shit together.
This last year, I gave us a presentation all about supportive accountability. And I use this metaphor of, with ADHD being an invisible disability. And I had this part in my presentation where I have this picture of a woman in a wheelchair looking up at the stairs. Right. And I asked the question, like, basically, you would think that anyone that would even suggest that this woman needs to just try harder to get those stairs, like, that would be a pretty asshole suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So part of it is you need to find the ramp, and sometimes you need to ask for the ramp. So if we could agree that ADHD is an invisible disability, and part of what is going to help us bridge good intentions into action is we have to build these bridges, and these bridges is accountability. Does it make sense for anyone with ADHD to even think that we can hold ourselves accountable?
It's a great question. I think if you can't hold yourself accountable, then it's going to be hard to, have others, help others as a coach hold themselves accountable. For me, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at the time like shit because I really want to challenge you on this here right now. So what about modeling the fact that like for the things that I know that I want and need to do, that I also know that I may have some resistance around, or
Mhm.
maybe dragging my feet around, or like whatever it is, when I share that intention with someone else with the intent of then needing to follow up to communicate and report about how I did with that thing, like to me, that is the bridge for me that bridges good intentions to actions, right?
Mhm.
It's not like, oh, I just need to figure out the best like productivity strategy to just get my shit done. It's okay if I'm recognizing that, all right, I've put this thing on my to-do list and I have now pushed it forward 3 different times and I still actually want to do it. Like, what is going on? Right?
Mhm.
It's like at that point is when I will include other people in the process all right, now I'm gonna have to report back to somebody else about what it is that I want to do. And I think that when we can say, you know what, that's part of I think for a lot of us, what is going to really help us make those connections between intentions and actions is being okay with the fact that, yeah, I needed accountability to do certain things. And being just completely okay with that, right? Instead of like, be sure we could explore that. Well, what does that mean if I need that? Well, what if we explored how wonderful is it if we can actually have relationships in our life that can allow us to have that because
Mhm.
it works?
Yes, and thank you for clarifying your position. I was sort of looking at one piece of accountability, which is through honesty and transparency. I mean, and that's just one piece of it. But asking for help, I think, is a superpower.
Mm.
Not everybody can do it. And my wife is like, she's like, you're great at asking for help. I'm like, well, thank you. I probably looked at it as, more of a sign of weakness until I started learning about myself and my diagnosis. Now I do look at it more as a sign or as a sign of a superpower. No question, bridges are incredibly important to build with others. To the initial point of just accountability with regards to transparency and trust, I think for me, knowing when you're not doing what you need to do, to your point of like, is it time? There's kind of two pieces to that. One is, okay, obviously this is not getting done. So do I need to ask for help? But also, is this something that should have been done without help? And am I making excuses for it?
What do you tell your clients when they say, I should have done this?
Get your shit together. No. I tell my clients that probably a version of what we just talked through, which is it something that you made an honest effort in trying to do? There's the motivation piece of, well, I know that I should do this thing. I'm just not doing it. Is it something that like, okay, there's the bridge there. Do you need the accountability partner piece there? Or is it something that you're forgetting and then we can build the bridge there? Or is it something that I just mentioned where, you really didn't need a bridge. You just, weren't doing it, and that it's okay. And that's going to happen. I tell my clients all the time, like I say to my kids, have a restart day, or I say reset day, like a video game. It's like I designate Fridays of all days as a reset day, probably because it's like, hey, I'm going into the weekend. It's like, we'll start fresh with everything else on Monday. There are going to be days and weeks where things feel off and you're not necessarily on your game, and that's okay. Designate a day where you start over.
Mm. One of the reasons I love coaching with ADHD is that it's like the everlasting gobstopper, but the onion version of it. Like you just keep peeling like the layers, and like
I
you
love
keep
it.
getting closer to the center, but there's never actually an actual like middle center because it just keeps on going.
I
And
wonder
you
how
know,
many
it's
listeners know what gobstopper is. I know it
is that
is.
is that like a thing that the kids don't know about these days? I don't know. It's oh man. So, I think there's a lot that we've explored here, right? We talked about how kind of how you got into this work in the first place and how your family history sort of led to this like you wanting to do better for others as well. And kind of just looking at, all right, you've had a lot of different job experiences and trying to figure out, all right, where do you fit? And as you're finding that and still finding that like, oh, wait, you're also still human and you have ADHD, and despite having struggles, you could also be doing really well, which I think you are. It sounds like you have things are going really well with your family, and you're growing the business. And it's a lot of these everyday things that can trip us up. And I think that our willingness and openness to really talk about it and explore where is the struggle kind of coming from and what can I do here? Because I think for a lot of us, just sometimes like talking about it with other people can help clarify some things. Jimmy, is there anything that you feel you have any more clarity on now after this conversation?
Oh gosh, this has been such a blast. Um, Clarity on, I'm not sure, pun intended there. I think it's clear that I am where I should be, and that's awesome. And then it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be messy, and that's okay. I think as long as as we were just talking about, hold ourselves accountable, whether it's through building a bridge or in other ways, we're going to keep moving forward.
I think that if we are on the growth path, especially if we know that we have obstacles that are going to be in our way, growth is going to be messy. To think that it's not going to be is, I think, magical thinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's if we can embrace the mess and embrace that sometimes there's going to be parts of what we're doing on the growth path that just kind of suck, but that it's also worth it. And the more we can learn and the strategies for sort of getting around those obstacles and get those sort of wins under our belt that kind of show, oh, I have gotten around these obstacles. So I think the more that we do that, I think that the more we're like, okay, like, yes, this sucks right now and this kind of hurts. This thing didn't work, but I also know that I can learn from this because that's what I've done in the past. And I have no reason to believe that that's not what's going to happen in the future. Right.
I agree. One of my favorite quotes is from the Rocky Balboa movie, which is the one that came out in mid to 2000s. And he just talks about, life ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a mean and nasty place. It will beat you to the ground if you let it. But, it's not about how hard you get hit, but getting up and how do you respond to it. And I love that.
So, Jamie, your website is anchoradhd.com. Is that the best place that people can reach you?
Yes.
Jamie Walsh, thank you so much for coming on and doing some coaching. It's always fun to be able to do that on a sort of one-on-one basis here on the podcast. And I wish you all the best of luck and success going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. This was a blast. I appreciate it.
Take care.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you're a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD reWired podcast network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.